Stop me if you've heard this before, but MMOs are dead. The genre is dead, and there's no point for us anymore. Despite popular sentiment, the MMO genre is not dead. And in this series, I want to show some games that prove that the MMO series is not only just not dead, but continues to thrive. And today, we're going to look at one of the longest running MMOs, the champion of MMO expansions. Today, we're going to look at Everquest. Everquest wasn't the first MMO. It was on the cusp, though. Released in 1999, this was the game that would change the genre forever, until 5 years later when another game would launch that would change the genre forever. We'll get to that one another time. Everquest was the concept of John Smedley, who infamously got in a Twitter fight with the hacking group Lizard Squad, that may or may not have been part of his eventual departure from SOE. Smedley is now part of the Amazon Game Studio out of San Diego. Brad McQuaid, Bill Trost, and Steve Klober are credited with the original design of Everquest. Bill Trost is now the creative director over at Amazon Game Studios. Brad McQuaid went on to create the cult classic Vanguard Saga of Heroes, which, while beloved by many, ultimately failed and closed. His final project was the forthcoming MMO, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, being developed by Visionary Realms, which now counts Steve Klober as a senior programmer. Everquest was originally developed by Sony's 989 Studios. Later, Variant Interactive and Sony Online Entertainment sold the studio, and it was rebranded into Daybreak Game Company. From humble beginnings and expectations, Everquest quickly grew. About a year after its launch, Everquest released its first massive expansion, Ruins of Kunark, and thus bringing us the best race in any MMO ever, the Ixar. This pattern would follow for the first 4 expansions, all released yearly with physical boxes. They'd include massive new land masses, new features, classes, and/or races. By 2003, with the launch of Legacy of Ikisha, expansions shifted from yearly to twice a year, and the scope was reduced. The twice-yearly expansion production lasted until about 2008, and they shifted back toward yearly expansions of varying degree of quality and change. Some of the most noteworthy expansions have to be Shadows of Lucklin, which added in the AA system back in 2001, as well as the first and last player character graphic overhaul. Planes of Power, which fundamentally changed much of the game mechanics regarding travel in 2002, Lost Dungeons of Norath, which introduced instancing in the game, Gates of Discord, which pushed many players away due to bad difficulty tuning, and launched the same year as Everquest 2 and World of Warcraft. The Serpent Spine was the last big expansion that was from level 1 to max, and it also added the last race to the game that we have received, the Draken. And finally, Seeds of Destruction, which added mercenaries, NPC characters you could hire to fill out your group. From the first expansion in 2000 through the most recent in 2021, there have been 28 Everquest expansions, making the game truly massive. Everquest height saw about 500,000 active subscribers back in 2003. Numbers in 2020, as shown via investor documents from EG7, put the game at about 66,000 subscribers with 82,000 monthly active players. Everquest added a free-to-play option, which accounts for the discrepancy, but also shows the number of players actually playing Everquest tend to be subscribers. Everquest spawned a series of multimedia as well to accompany the game, from action figures and books to single-player games like Champions of Norath. Other MMOs were spawned, Everquest Online Adventures on console and Everquest 2, an updated, more WoW-like version of the game. As for Everquest 3, or Everquest Next, we just don't talk about Everquest Next. Landmark could have been a game. Just launch Landmark. Why not? What do you have to lose at this point? It's just basically Everquest Minecraft. The first thing people will point to when they look at an MMO like Everquest and say it's dead is the subscriber count. And yes, 500,000 to 66,000 is a pretty steep decline. Until you look at the timing. This has occurred over 2 decades. New World did this in less than a year. At EverQuest's peak, there really wasn't much competition, at least not by today's standards. You had a couple games here and there, and some of them were actually even from the same company. But World of Warcraft hadn't shattered the expectations of a successful MMO yet. The success of an MMO to me has never been that, has never been the massive numbers. It comes down to a simple 3-point system that I use. Number 1, are there enough players that all in-game activities can feel relevant? Number 2, are there enough subscriptions to warrant continued investment in the game, dealing with new expansions and updates, i.e. active development? And number 3, is the game still fun? The answer to number 1 can often be solved by server merges, but that can sometimes cause conflict with number 2. And number 3 is going to be very subjective, but I think it's still tied to the first two. EverQuest subscription numbers may be a massive drop from their peak, but the game is still hitting number 1 and 2 on active servers with a slight caveat. EverQuest on live servers between level 1 and near max is a wasteland. There is little to do but grab your mercenary and go solo. This can lead to the game feeling dead, or at the very least, a need to bring your own group, or maybe get a level boost to level 100. This isn't the case on progression servers, as long as you can keep up with the sometimes torrid pace of leveling. But it does showcase a very big issue for the game. Still, at max level, there's plenty of content to engage in with friends and strangers alike. The population that plays is active, if the markets in the game are any evidence of that, and while sometimes slow to do so, server mergers happen to consolidate populations when they get too low. People have been so eager to declare the genre, and by extension this game, dead, they have turned a blind eye to the positive signs of continued life. This hardly scratches the surface of the absolute amazing success that a game released in 1999 is not only still going, it's still creating content. How many things do you know from 1999 that are still relevant? Is Abercrombie & Fitch still relevant to you? What about the Backstreet Boys? But what else from the 90s, the late 90s, and the early 2000s is still relevant to you today and still creating and producing content? 28 expansions later, new world events, upgraded clients, a new UI coming in 2023, and no signs of stopping that development cycle of at least one expansion per year. Over 2 decades from its launch, EverQuest has shown just what kind of longevity a game can have. Blizzard Watch had a fantastic article on the subject last year. There were 2 main takeaways. First, that market dominance isn't key to staying power, which can perhaps redefine our ideas of what is a dead MMO and what is a successful MMO. If you want to look at numbers, New World had a higher concurrent peak than EverQuest did in its entire history by almost double. But is there any doubt as to which game is more successful? Which game is more successful currently? You know, I feel like I'm picking on New World a little bit. I guess I could have done this with Lost Ark or Bless Unleashed, but Bless Unleashed didn't even get to that maximum number. I don't know. Maybe it's because New World didn't ship with swimming. Yes, I am still salty about that. Sure, they just added music and it's cool and all. I had fun with it in the recent update. But why can't you swim? Why? There's water. It's a freaking island. You made a game that's an island. Is the reason why everyone is stuck on the island because they can't swim? Now, EverQuest has a loyal core of players. In fact, it's largely how this channel began to grow when a video on playing the game after Planes of Power took off. Players that have invested time, made connections and memories in EverQuest find it more difficult to leave, and it makes it easier to come back. While passions are intense about the game, both positive and negative, it still resonates with people today. Back in 2019, Holly Longdale, then executive producer, had what I think is an important quote in an interview with PCGamer.com for not just EverQuest, but MMOs in general, wanting to create some kind of stickiness across decades. EverQuest has essentially been a survival game, she says. You can't do anything significant without other people. You can't achieve the pinnacle of the game and get the best gear without being with other human beings. And that requires people to talk to each other and rely on each other. And that has, over the years, sustained this very social community. Our players organize themselves, which we feel creates a strong emotional commitment. And not just to each other, but to the game as well and to their characters. And for us, for anything we do in the future, That sense of community really is the heart and soul of the Everquest series. What this says to me is that people are what are making Everquest, and while it hasn't dominated the market since Warcraft launched back in 2004, its population hasn't slipped below the line that would make it unplayable. Everquest is a social game. Its population has stuck with it for decades, in part because the game has rewarded players with development and nostalgia. Going back to the article, it points to Everquest expansions maintaining player interest. And I'd suggest this is about half true, as there are very distinct populations within that 66 to 80,000 players. New expansions bring in new and exciting zones, lore, features, and much more to the game. They keep the current live players happy, but they aren't the only players that are playing EverQuest, and those other players probably don't care. Progression servers have been a hit since they were introduced in 2006, and have now begun to launch yearly, something the studio wouldn't do unless the servers were still profitable. These servers essentially rehash old content and allow players to relive things that they may have missed. I can speak to this from my personal experience as someone who left the game in 2004, not for that one, but for EverQuest 2. I left, but I kept coming back. I burst originally in 2006 for the Sleeper and Combine progression servers, the very first progression servers. From there, after running through some of that content, I bounced around. I went to Star Wars Galaxies, Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, EverQuest 2, countless other MMOs. MMOs I don't even remember the name of anymore. Does anyone remember Olids Online? I played that. What about Rift? I played Rift a lot. Why? I don't know why. I think I enjoyed the PvP until I came back to EverQuest in 2016. Really, 2015. In 2015, I joined the Ragefire server. Now, Ragefire was a dumpster fire, absolute dumpster fire, but it led to some of the most important changes that I think this game has made to make the progression server something worth doing for many people to come. In 2016, with the Finagil progression server, Agents of Change were included in the game, and later pick zones, which would allow you to be in a zone, a full-fledged zone, with a set number of players that the zone could theoretically support. This allowed you to actually play the game instead of sitting and waiting. And this is where I had the most fun, made the most memories in EverQuest. I played from 2016 all the way through 2020, almost to 2021, on the Finagil server. I basically played the lifespan of a progression server. I made lifelong friends, I made memories, I experienced content I never had the opportunity to play through. I played through basically every single expansion in EverQuest, and I loved it. I loved getting to see the gradual change, and it was an experience that really is unlike anything else. The experience that I went through is not quite the same kind of experience that someone who's played from the beginning will have gone through. I was experiencing a new expansion every couple months, but it was still a brand new and wonderful experience for me. And I got the nostalgia of playing through some of the old stuff that I had done before, like Ruins of Canark and Bellius and Lucklin, and even Plains of Power. It created lifelong memories, some of them good, like charging in to defeat Carafirm finally, among like all of our corpses. Like, you know, it was a lot. We died a lot on that fight in Secrets of Fadeware. And then bad ones like Epic 2.0 orbs. Apologies to anyone who was in my guild at the time. That was rough. The point being that as a self-proclaimed super fan or fan of this game, my best experiences of the game were in the last 5 years. If the game were dead, would that have been possible? And while many people will look to EverQuest and think that it died in 2004, the past 18 years tell a different story. They have caused so many new memories for so many people playing the game. But what does the future hold for EverQuest? Well, we now have a better idea because of investment documents from their new parent company, EG7. So far, the company appears to be a step up from Columbus Nova, which, between being embroiled in various scandals, look like they might sell off the IP. Things are looking increasingly brighter, if not overly exciting for the game, with Jen Chan as the new head of studio following the departure of Holly Longdale, spearheading increased communication and, at least to me, seemingly more in touch with the player base. We've gotten a roadmap with updates showing the forthcoming imminent changes to the game, like their 29th expansion, which should be ready for beta testing in October of 2022, and a UI revamp in 2023. It's not all roses, some of the targets have been missed, and the forums have been very active, as expected, about struggles with the class balancing. But to that I say, you can't complain about a game that's dead, unless it's Star Wars Galaxies. NGE. Everquest is far from the only MMO that's not dead. I have some other MMOs in mind, but I want to know what you think. What are some MMOs that you would like highlighted in this series? What MMOs do you think prove that the genre is not dead? I covered some of the longevity of games earlier this year in this video here. So why don't they take a look over there and see what is it about those games that made them stick around so long? Decades even. Go on, click it. It's 25 years of MMO history. Why not? Thank you so much for watching. My name is Redbeard Flynn, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.